Hey, Dr. Prem, thank you for doing this, lah. We've never met, but your representatives have been in touch. And when they raised the subject of addiction in Malaysia, I thought it was very
Hmm.
apt that we have this conversation because I think not many people realize that times have been quite tough and it's taken its toll on people. And I think you put out some
Hmm.
reports which suggest that addiction is on the rise in Malaysia, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, gambling addictions. And it seems to me that we need to shed some light on the issue. Lah. Maybe I'll pass it
Hmm.
on to you and you can tell me what has really been driving this trend in Malaysia.
Okay. Firstly, thank you very much, Chuang, for having me. I think you're right. This is a very important topic. See, the thing is that the problem with addictions or substance misuse, there have been so many different ways it has been called over the years. I wouldn't say it's something new. Yeah, it has been around for decades. It's been around for ages. If you look at the history of alcoholism, it goes back to even during the prehistoric periods. Maybe not prehistoric, but during the Romans and in all those times, there's always been alcohol and abuse has always been present. Now, the reason we feel that it's gotten worse is because we talk about it more and more people are aware that this is a problem. Addiction is a problem. And also the fact that over the last maybe 20 years, we have come to accept and we've come to even realize that this is not a behavioral issue, but it's actually a disease. What we are battling with is something known as a chronic relapsing disorder in the brain. In a way, that's been good because now that we know it's a disease and it's an illness, then we can treat it. You don't shun them away, you don't push them away from the society. It can be treated, and there are means to treat people who suffer from addictions. Just like mental health, right? Since the pandemic and since the lockdown, globally, if you look at almost every other country in the world, people are talking about mental health, people are talking about work stress, people are talking about finding a work life balance even. Yeah, because now people are more aware that this is a problem and it can be treated. So similarly, I with addictions as well.
I know addiction has always existed, lah, of course, Roman times and thousands of years ago. But in Malaysia, the trend line, at least anecdotally, is because life is quite hard.
Yeah.
Prices are going up, jobs are getting more scarce, the technology disruption, and of course, just generally the pace of development of geopolitics and kind of stuff like that, right? Have you seen a spike? And I just want to reference your report. Two things strike me as interesting about your report. One is that quite a lot of civil servants are affected. I think something like 40, 50,000, right? Which
Mm.
seems like a lot. Because when you think that maybe civil servants, like maybe a million of them, right? That's, I think, 4%, which is quite a lot, right?
Mm.
And then I think
Mm.
secondly of all, you also point out that the northern and eastern states, Kelantan, Terengganu, Perlis,
Mm.
maybe the little bit more impoverished states are also more affected, and among the
Mm.
youth as well. So, what do you
Mm.
think are the drivers behind those levels?
Okay. Okay. I think, okay, firstly, the stats that we find that you're looking at stats that were revealed by the ministry, and this is from surveys conducted. So the 40,000 people here in the government servant, and I'm looking at them now, I mean, I'm looking at the stats here. They're referring to people who have been at high risk of developing serious mental health related issues. Now, the thing with addiction is that it's also a mental health related issue. And there is a correlation between some mental health issues, which then lead into substance misuse, which then ultimately leads into addictions. For example, people who suffer from depression, they tend to use substances to numb the depression or to numb the pain they feel. People who suffer from ADHD, high attention deficit disorders, are at higher risk of abusing substances as they grow up. So there is a correlation between some mental health disorders and addictions as well. That's the first thing, right? So when we know that certain people are predisposed, for example, and the other thing is we need to understand that addiction, just like any other illness, has a genetic predisposition also. Okay. So, for example, if I have an addiction issue, then my children are at higher risk of developing it. Doesn't mean they will become dependent on addicts, but they're at higher risk. It's just like a mental health disorder or cancer or any other medical issue. Addiction has a 30 to 50% genetic predispositions. Now, to answer your question, Chuang, about the certain regions, why certain parts of the country are at higher risk of developing this addiction problem with the population, geographical, socioeconomic status also make a difference. Now, we find that kampung nelayans, so fishing villages, more people are abusing um, stimulants, okay? Why are they abusing stimulants? Because fishermen, they need to go out to sea, and they stay in the sea for what? Sometimes a week, sometimes even longer. So they use substances to stimulate the brain so much that they don't have to sleep and they can stay alert. Sadly, what happens is they don't realize after a while they become addicted. Stations where they have nothing else to do, it's boring. They come back, they go to tap rubber maybe 4 or 5 in the morning. They come back by 7 o'clock before it's dawn. They're already back in the house and there's no work. And that's also one of the reasons alcoholism became a big issue, and it still is. If I can, I can't remember the stats now. With the Indian community, why is it that we say the Indians abuse a lot of alcohol? Because they started abusing alcohol in the estates like long time ago. When they go to tap rubber or they go to the palm oil, they come back, they sleep. There's nothing else to do. So a toddy shop was given in each estate, and the only thing they could do is drink. There's only entertainment they had. So they developed this need, which then after a while, they developed this drinking, which serves a purpose. Then after that became a need, ultimately became an addiction. So similarly, in certain regions in the country, you will find certain types of substances being abused. So certain people use certain types of substances. Professionals doesn't necessarily mean only fishermen or the people from that socioeconomic group do substances. No. Professionals also abuse. We treat lawyers, pilots, doctors, teachers. We have treated quite a few of them as well. And why do they abuse? Yeah, okay. Well, for example, let me give you an example. Pilots flying long hours or trying to stay awake while they're flying, they use stimulants to stay awake, to keep their brain stimulated. Doctors, medical professionals, they have more access to substances. They have access to opioid-based substances, and they can start using it to stay awake, say, for example, in the emergency wards or during surgeries or for whatever reason. Then they become addicted because it's easily available. Long-haul drivers, lorry drivers, people who, in fact, that's how stimulant, one of the means how stimulant came about. Ice, methamphetamine were abused by these truck drivers who had to drive for 12 hours, 15 hours. So they use it to keep the brain so stimulated so they can focus. But what happens is our brain only can tahan for so long. After that, the brain needs to rest, the brain needs oxygen, and you need to sleep, so you collapse. And that's when all the problems come. So it's highs, lows. You basically disrupt your whole natural organic neurochemicals in the brain. Then the brain has to find a way to find a balance. So people become psychotic. People go into mental health related issues. So yeah, different people use different kinds of substances.
Extreme addiction, the repercussions of that are quite clear, marriage breakups and suicides and whatnot, right? But for those who don't have those extreme consequences, like let's just say professionals, for example, I know in my peer group, a lot of my friends, they tend to drink a lot, and they tend to, it seems to me that they're doing it in a celebratory social setting, but it does seem as a little bit on the excessive side. So what are the repercussions of a heavy user rather than, so of course it's not a chronic addiction, maybe it's a heavy user verging on chronic addiction. What are the consequences of that?
Okay. Quite often people ask us this question. My son or my daughter or my husband or whatever, is drinking a lot. And then the question is, when does it cross the line and when do they become addicted? Right? How do you classify or how do you diagnose somebody as chronic or moderate or functioning, right? So without going into too much of clinical or technical jargon, the simplest answer to that, Chuang, is that once your life becomes unmanageable and you cannot function without the substance, then basically you've got an addiction problem. Okay? But if you're functioning, you're able to perform your duties, you're drinking during parties, you're drinking after work, and you're still able to function. What's wrong? You're still able to fulfill your roles. So the thing is, not everybody crosses that line and becomes addicted. Like I was saying earlier, 30 to 50% of it may be biological, genetic factors. All right. Now we say this is a biopsychosocial spiritual disease. Biological, psychological, social, spiritual. 4 factors why some people are at higher risk. This is a very, very age-old theory that says there are 4 factors. 1, biological reasons, genetics being one of them, or pain management being one of them. You meet an accident, you've got a chronic pain, you need to take opioids, you need to take painkillers. You cannot sleep, you need to take sleeping pills every day. After a while, you naturally become addicted. 2, psychological factors. stresses, people who are living under stresses, people who are not able to manage life on life's terms, they use substances. Celebrities, when they are in the limelight, or the singers, pop star, musicians, these people, when they cannot take that kind of limelight or attention, they use substances to give them the fake boost. Social, the environment you live in. If you're living in an environment where everybody is smoking weed, for example, and you're forced to do it, if you're already predisposed in the first two areas, then socially you try it. So it's like a recipe for disaster, right? The fourth factor, which we talk about, is spirituality here. Now, spirituality here does not refer to faith or religion. No. Basically, here from a science perspective or scientific perspective, you're talking about your values, your belief system, your self-esteem. So some people or other who have lower self-esteem, who have a lack of confidence, and they're put on a stage where they need to perform, they use fake, they get a fake boost from the drugs or the alcohol. You see, after drinking, they become so confident and they're dancing and they're singing and they'll be able to socialize. That's the fake boost they get. So 4 reasons why some people become addicted. So out of the 4, maybe the biological part is something you cannot control. Psychological, social, spiritual, these 3 areas is where these 3 variables or other is something you can try and fix, or you can try and do some kind of intervention to help people.
So why are so many civil servants addicted, doctor? They seem like quite an ordinate number.
Actually, if you ask me, I wouldn't say only civil servants are addicted. I think it's just that the statistics are showing a higher number there because the stats, stats are like that. You can show what you want to show. Statistic just depends on what formula you use to express the theory or what you're trying to prove. But civil servants, why are civil servants more addicted? I don't think civil servants are more addicted. I think generally everybody is abusing. Overall, Overall, there is a higher rate of substance misuse. Why? 1, it's 2, cost. It's cheaper now. It doesn't cost as much as it used to. I think during our time, in the 70s, 80s, the most common drug was cannabis, ganja, heroin.
Really?
That's what we know. Yeah.
Really? My gosh.
Well, you're trying to guess my age now.
No, I think we're about the same.
Yeah, I think so too. That's why I said our time. No, but I would think, actually it's a fact, heroin and ganja was very common besides alcohol. But now the type of substances you find is scary. They have synthetic drugs. They have synthetic cannabis. Cannabis that we know, or ganja, is leaves, correct? But now there's synthetic-based cannabis. It's liquid where you can add it into your vapor, and school kids are smoking it.
Oh my God.
Why? Yes, it's really bad. I can tell you some really scary stories. And sadly, some of these synthetic drugs cannot be detected in urine. So you have a young fellow who's psychotic. He's like delusional. He's like, oh, somebody is following me, or I am God and I'm going to save the world. Oh, God has come unto me and given me powers. They become delusional and psychotic. Then you test your urine. It doesn't show for anything. So you think this fellow is now schizophrenic or has become psychotic for whatever reason. And you start treating him for the wrong illness, for the wrong diagnosis. When actually there is some kind of drugs in his system. And the law may not be able to help him as well because legally his urine is negative. It doesn't show anything. So all these new types of drugs, availability, you can buy substances now through the online. People order them, The dark web is one of the best places to buy substances. Yeah.
Insane.
It is very, and let me complicate it even further. You can cook it. Now it's not difficult to get the recipe online.
Well,
methamphetamine.
Let's not reveal the methodologies. They make it worse, man. My goodness. Yeah. Okay, then what about those other states, right? Kelantan. Why Kelantan, Terengganu, Perlis, right? Is it socioeconomic in nature?
No, also nature? Because it's bordering the north.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the Golden Triangle area already, the north,
So there's a prevalence of stuff there, right?
Yeah. So it's easier to smuggle them, from across the border, and so that's, and it's cheaper, way cheaper. So it's easily available. And it's talking about the East Coast, like Terengganu, Kelantan. One particular substance that is very commonly abused there is something called pil kuda, ketamine.
Meth, is it meth?
No, it's ketamine. It's not meth. Meth
Or
also,
K,
but
K
K.
lah.
Yeah. It's
It's cheap,
cheaper there.
right?
Yes. So it's cheaper, the socioeconomic status, of course, like you said. So it's easily available and it's cheaper. So they can buy it, lah.
Um,
Sadly.
I'm and I'm looking at your report now as well, right? And there's quite a lot of young people. I think 36% were like SPM or school
Mm,
leavers lah.
mm.
So that's quite worrying, loh, because those are the working age guys that are going to enter the
Yes.
workforce, and they're not in any state to work.
Mm.
So then they become a drain on
Yes.
society.
Yes. Which is sadly happening. So we are losing the younger generation to addictions. Now, talking about addictions, so far we've only been talking about substances. What about behavioral addictions? What about
Gaming?
gambling? Yes, gaming, gambling, and now sex, pornography. I say now, not because now sex addictions is worse, but people have got more access to internet. You can find anything. Your whole world is there in your internet, and you can download anything you want, and it's difficult to control them. So it's more convenient for them to get addicted. Social media with the all our what do you call this Instagram la, TikTok la, information is coming out in short bursts. Earlier we were talking about how long a podcast would normally be. Yeah? I remember I said that shorter better la, for people to focus because people are now unable to focus for too long already. We want quick bursts in information. And what we're doing is we are stimulating our brains, or we are conditioning our brains to that 1 minute of information so much that we ourselves struggle to focus for too long already, especially the younger generation. I'm talking about the younger generation more than us. They cannot tahan for too long. You ask them to watch a commentary for 3 minutes. For that matter, you look at TikTok, anything that more than 1 minute, you swipe. Don't want. Too long. The brain cannot focus, is it? So we are creating more people with ADHD. Sorry, go on.
I was just talking to somebody about watching a movie the other day, right? Two other adults, lah. And they were saying that they can't even watch a full movie anymore, And these are adults.
Neither can I.
I don't sit through a 2 hour movie, What is going on?
Sadly, Chuang, I'm one of those adults also.
It's like,
It takes
I watch a movie over like 4 installments, 5
Me
installments.
too.
So if extrapolated over the long term, right, what does this mean for the human psyche? How do you see it all, kind of like evolving?
Okay. Let's look at technology today, all right? Now we are into AI already. And now the latest trend is something known as digital dualism. Not sure if you've heard of it, huh? Digital dualism is the two worlds that we are living in. One is the digital world, your AI la, your gaming la, whatever online, okay? Another one is the real world, okay? So those days we used to say, oh, the real world is a real world, but the digital world is not real, all right? Don't get sucked into that, that's not the real. But today, it's two worlds. You don't really have a choice. You and I are now talking to each other. I don't know which part of the country you're at, but we are still communicating. This is a world for us. You get what I mean? So this is reality. So we have to accept that digital dualism is now the next problem that's going to start happening. We create an identity in the digital world. All right. We can do anything you want in the digital world. That is why you see a lot of this bullying, cyberbullying, a lot of, you hear so many people, I mean, not so many, but you hear people committing suicide. You hear people being bullied, in the cyber world, because that's a reality they create in that world. They become perpetrators. In the real world, they may not be, So they prefer to be in that world than in the real world. So digital dualism is another thing that now we need to be prepared for.
No, this YouTube podcast, right, Doctor? And some of the remarks, some of the comments from viewers, right, can be downright cruel and rude and in fact evil, But then when you see their name, it's like not a real name, it's like a series of alphabets, right? So they're hiding behind these identities. And so in the digital world, they're real assholes, But in the real world, they could be damn nice people. So you're right.
Oh, yeah.
Different people,
Yeah.
I don't get it. I mean, so it's like they're becoming bipolar. Does it encourage, different personalities? What do you think?
Well, they're definitely psychologically affected. That's a fact. Okay, there's no doubt about it. Do they develop mental health issues? Yes, I would think so too. Do they develop different personalities? Maybe not personalities, but psychologically they can be two different people completely. Okay, like you just said, that's a very good example actually. Bullies, They can be very narcissistic, big bully, but in the real world, the guy may even be a priest somewhere. You'll never know.
Yeah, my goodness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Look at the
exactly.
rape cases. It's
Exactly.
shocking. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's shocking. It's two different identities that they live, two different worlds that they live, and you'll never know.
In your center, then how do you treat them? How do you kind of zap them out of this? Is there a high rate of failure or success?
Okay, let's put it this way. Addiction, like I said earlier, it's a chronic relapsing disorder of the brain. Okay. So what does success mean? Does success mean someone who's completely stopped for the rest of his life? So there are two ways to look at it. One is the abstinence model. In Solace, we practice initially, in Solace when we started treating people to the abstinence model. Abstinence means if you're alcoholic, you have to quit drinking completely. If you're a drug addict, you have to quit drugs completely. If you're a sex addict, quit sex completely? Then we started questioning. If you've got an eating disorder, what? Stop eating completely? You see? So then came another model of treatment called the sustainable recovery model or harm reduction model. So harm reduction basically means you reduce the harm that it causes. You can still function, you do whatever you need to do, but the harm is reduced. Now, the concept of harm reduction started with heroin addiction actually many years ago, where heroin users or opiate users, you remember people inject their hands, right?
Yeah.
And when they inject, very often they share needles. Addicts share needles, HIV, AIDS, diseases started spreading. So when we started telling them, hey, stop using drugs, don't inject, it's bad for you, they couldn't because they were addicted so badly. So we turned around and said, you know what? If you need to inject, but change the noodle. At least we reduce the harm of HIV spreading. Miraculously, it was very successful. I think this concept was started in Australia, if I'm not mistaken. Malaysia introduced it in the early 80s. Very successful. Strangely, when we practice harm reduction, not only did HIV reduce, heroin users also reduce by themselves. So harm reduction is a very successful model. We forgot about harm reduction because we thought it only worked for heroin. Today, we have so many types of drugs. Like I was saying, you have cannabis, you have synthetic drugs, you have ketamine, you have spice, you can go on and on, amphetamines, you have methamphetamines, right? So how do we tell people don't use so much of meth, use lesser meth? Because meth still causes you to become addicted, psychotic sooner or later, right? So what we do is we treat, sometimes instead of treating the addict, we treat the family, okay? We have the family to understand, look, if you change, this fellow also can change. Yeah. If the dynamics, the system in the family changes, this fellow also may have a better insight to stop. Yeah. So now from the abstinence model in Solace initially, we also incorporate harm reduction. A harm reduction only works for certain types of drugs, certain types of addictions, not for everything. Like I was explaining earlier, you can't stop an eating. You're from Penang, Chuang. 90% of Penangites are all the foodies.
99%, okay?
Including me. You tell me, hey, stop eating.
No, not possible. There's so much food.
Right? Exactly.
Food is a thing, right? And some people are addicted to eating. I mean, there's, right?
Yeah. It's a rush again.
So how like that, doctor? How like that, I mean,
harm reduction, don't eat too much.
We do live in an age of abundance, and so with all these things at our disposal, one phone call you can get delivery boy, correct. Fast food, everything, right?
Correct.
And then internet, all the things like gambling, porn, everything, right?
Yeah. Gambling nowadays, you don't need money. You can use tokens to start gambling online already, and then after that, someone comes to the house and collects money. They have this weird ways of making it easier.
So nipping in the bud, right? Maybe your children or young people. How do we get it early, You know what I'm saying? Is there a way?
Well, what I've always been preaching in schools or in universities or in hospitals or even in solace with the families is the only way is to create awareness. Exactly what we are doing now. Create awareness. Talk about it. And if you do have someone at home, see, the rule of the thumb is this. If you think your loved one is behaving suspiciously, then yes, you're right. Don't doubt yourself. There must be a reason why you think he's behaving suspiciously, okay? And get him help. All right. If you have a loved one at home who's struggling with drugs or alcohol, get them help. Don't shun them away. That's the mistake we have been making for ages. And all this while, I thought it was an Asian thing where, the whole family jumps together and tries to protect the fellow, and we keep the secret. We don't want the neighbor to know. We don't want the family to know. We don't want the relatives to know. That's the worst thing you can do. And it's not really an Asian thing. I see this happening in other
And
countries
then
as well.
if you ever get treated, right, is that like some kind of government assistance scheme, or do they have to go to the private sector and, you know, we have to pay, you know, maybe they can't afford it, right? If the
Yes,
lack of money is the problem in the first place.
yes, you're right. Okay, let's look at it this way, okay? If you are sick, you're not well, you go to the government hospital. You go GH lah, okay?
Mm.
If you have more money, you go to a private hospital lah. You see specialists, right? Addiction is like that. It's an illness. If you are sick, you're unwell, you got a drug problem, the government are there to help. Government is there. They have this agency anti-data, AADK, Agency Anti-Data Kebangsaan.
But most addicts, right, doctor, they don't go themselves, or they don't admit to their
Yeah,
addiction. That's the
yeah.
problem, though, right?
Yes, you're right.
Like
More.
it's like you tell a kid, right, hey, you're addicted to gaming, the whole day you're the bloody game, right? He will not think he's addicted because what's the problem, right? But he's on the phone 12 hours a day. 100% you're addicted, right? You know?
Yeah, yeah. So you see, okay, let's look at the science of that. Like I said, addiction is a disease in the brain. Okay, so what it does is affects the reward system of the brain. Now the brain has got different parts, reward system, blah 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 blah. Now the part that the addiction generally stimulates or is a result from is a deficiency in the reward system. Once the reward system is hijacked, the rational part of the brain tends to not function so well. So when he is addicted, his reward system is active, rational is low. He goes into denial. I don't have a problem. I can stop when I want. You know, it's not me. It's my whoever is causing this.
I know some guys who drink a lot, right? And then like, well, I'm not addicted, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just a social thing, but there's a copious amounts of alcohol they put away, you know.
Yeah. You know, I know, but he doesn't see it because his reward system is so active. It's so hyped up. The dopamine is firing, firing, that it makes him high. The rational is slapped down already, stepped over, is it? And the denial becomes a defense mechanism. The denial becomes a very strong defense mechanism for the addiction to be constant.
You know, you talk about a lot of the vulnerability of ADHD people to addiction, right? In the first place, I've also seen a real increase in the number of ADHD cases, you know, especially among children, friends' children, right? Especially among the males. Have you seen the spike in cases, and what's leading to this increase?
Okay. Well, there are a few views on this. One is that ADHD today is one of the more overdiagnosed illnesses. Okay. The child naughty a bit, active a bit, go see the doctor, pop, ADHD, right? Those days when a child is active, you think, nakal saja lah, he's just active lah, he's naughty lah, we leave it. But today, because of the so many types of diagnosis and because of science and technology, every symptom, you put 10 symptoms together in one person, it becomes a disorder, or it becomes a diagnosis. It may not be. Maybe you fed the blood too much of sugar a day, or whatever, just ate too many chocolates. So it's jumping. So that's one thing we need to be cautious about. But then with that said, I also believe with technology today, like I was sharing earlier, TikTok and Twitter and blah, 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 and this influx of information, you are stimulating your brain to respond to short stimuli. So it's possible that you're already conditioning yourself to become more ADHD prone lah, because you don't want it. Who wants to read a book today? Who reads books?
Bro, I bought 2 books last year, February, right? I have not finished them yet, you know. But when I was a kid, I used to finish a book in 2 weeks.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, because your brain is so used to...
I become ADHD. So when I had my son, I passed on this gene to him, is it? I mean, there's a chance of that, right?
Yes, it's possible. Assuming that yours is genetic. Assuming that you already had it when you were born, then your child is at higher risk. But you said in your case, okay, let's talk about you. You said when you were young, you could focus, you could read, but now you can't. Maybe it's a result of technology and your exposure.
I think so. I think sure it's a reason, yeah.
Yeah. Because remember, even though we talk about genetics so much, there's such a thing as epigenetics. Epigenetics says that the environment also molds you. Right? Doesn't mean if I'm born from a murderer. For example, we look at twin studies. There are lots of twin studies with alcoholism. You take twins, you put one fellow in the family where the father and the parents are alcoholics and abusive. You take another fellow, you put him in a good family lah. Later, it doesn't mean both of them become addicted. The studies show that one may be addicted, one may not be addicted, because the environment, that's why the psychosocial aspects, very important. Even though biologically, the fellow carries gene, but psychologically and socially, the nurturing influence the spiritual side of his self-esteem and his values. So becomes a healthy person lah. So I wouldn't worry so much about the genetic factor, because genetic is only 1 out of the 4 you cannot control. Psychological, social, spiritual, you can still manage, you can still treat. And that's what we do in Solace. To answer your earlier question, is it? We focus on these areas which we can treat. Psychologists, counselors, recovery coaches, people who are in recovery themselves, who have life experience, psychiatrists. If you need medication, then we get a psychiatrist to give you the pill if you have got depression or ADHD. So we need a full team to help. You need a village to get someone healthy lah. It's the same concept. You need a team lah to help people get well.
So parting shots, doctor, for those who, who want to prevent it rather than treat it later on down the line, all right? What are some of the 2 or 3 things we should know?
Okay, one thing, let's say if you have a family member or you yourself have an illness, mental health illness or disease, then you need to be aware that your loved one or your children, may be at risk. Watch out for symptoms. Educate them. Explain to them. If you feel, then go to the next step. If you feel that the person is not well or behaving strangely, like I said earlier, the chances are you're right. He is not well. Get him help. Do not sweep it under the carpet. It's not wrong to talk about it today. It's not the stigma anymore. It's open. About 10 years ago, I do some work in the Middle East, all right? I go there very often, almost every month. In fact, we're building a big rehab and a hospital in Oman today. Who would have thought the Middle East would have hospitals and rehabs to treat addictions? 10 years ago, it never existed.
So so since you have an international viewpoint, right, what is the trend line of addiction elsewhere around the world? Is it the same issues, generally speaking, or is it different circumstances?
I would say it's the same.
Okay.
Pretty much the same. The same types of substances, abused by almost the same types of category of people, and abused in almost the same areas of socioeconomic status. Nothing much has changed. The world has shrunk. The globe is now smaller because of access, travel access and internet access. So very fast. Look at both of us. I don't know where you are, but we can communicate in lifetime,
Yeah.
Globe has shrunk. Borderless already. So it's the same. Problems are the same.
Wow.
But,
okay. It's interesting.
But
yeah.
what the point I was trying to make, my second point, is that the stigma, So if you think you have a loved one who has a problem, it's okay. He's just not well. The fellow needs treatment. He's not a bad kid. He's just a sick kid or a sick person. We used to call them Najis Masyarakat, right? Our time. Remember? Actually, they're not Najis Masyarakat. They're Masyarakat yang sakit.
Yeah, and as you point out now, some of these addictions are not overtly traditional, right? It could be gambling, it could be gaming, it could be porn. And you can't, how does this manifest in behavior? You can't really tell it, right?
Yes, very hidden.
Drug addiction, alcohol, you can see the effects on the physical.
Correct.
But behavioral, hard.
Yeah.
It can embed over many years.
Yeah.
And then, maybe they become some danger to society later on down the line. Right?
Yeah. The worst silent killer is suicide, depression. Because sometimes they don't show you signs, especially with gambling. Gambling addictions, one of the dangerous things about it is suicide ideations. And sadly, it's not very obvious, sadly.
Suicide ideation as in thinking of suicide?
Yeah. So there's suicide ideation, there's attempted suicide, and then there's such a thing as accidental suicide. They keep trying, they don't know if they want to do it. I give you an example. I actually had a patient some time ago. This guy was suffering from depression, and he tried to hang himself. So he tied a rope to the fan, and he tried the rope. The rope gave way, he was going to hang himself, And then he came to me for help. He said, "Oh, doctor, I'm suicidal." So I said, "Okay, what happened? Oh, I'm in depression." So we put him on medication. He got better. Then he started talking more during therapy. He said he tried twice, to hang himself. First time the rope snapped. Second time the fan dropped. Yeah, exactly. So I'm like,
not very smart, but...
No, but the thing is, I asked him, I said, okay, so what does that mean? You attempted 2 suicides, right? And twice you escaped. What does that mean to you? He said, oh, maybe God does... He was quite a pious... I think he believed in God. He said, maybe God doesn't want me to die. Yeah. What happens is the third time you tried, God is not available that day. It's his off day. Yeah. Accidental suicide.
Just to switch gears a bit, Dr. Prem, and we end with this, right? Remember a movie with Bruce Willis? I mean, our time, Sixth Sense, remember?
Sixth Sense, yes.
Right? And so he helps these people with troubled medical conditions, right? And it troubles him because you're taking a lot of people's stress, right? But I see you on screen, you seem like a kind of nice, jovial, happy guy, right? It's hard because if I'm hearing all these tales of distress every day, do my head in, man. But you're like, hey, you're pretty chill, man. It's good, right? How do you deal with this yourself?
Okay, good question. Someone just asked me the question about 2 hours ago. I was having a meeting. Well, we need therapy also, Chuang. People like us, clinicians. Right? Yes. We have our own supervisors. We call it clinical supervision. Yeah, we call it because you take it back, and sadly, it may affect your family also, your own relationships.
You know, right? You're taking all the grief from people, right?
Yeah. So we have regular therapy ourselves. It helps.
Yeah. And, well, society needs more people like you, Doctor. Because without you, it could be a lot worse. So thank you for doing this, Doctor.
Oh, thank you for talking about it. This is really good because, to answer your earlier question, what helps is prevention, and prevention comes from education. And this is what you guys are doing. This is excellent. Thank you for spreading the message. This is really good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Thank you, Chuang. Enjoy the char kway teow.
Hopefully not 5 plates, only 1 plate enough already.
I will come join you the next time I'm in Penang.
Okay, brother. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.